what has been your experience of other religions, and what's something that's captivated you about Jesus?
Morning, everyone. My name is Kwan. Great questions. I once dated a Muslim girl, and so by trying to make it work, I would think, well, devout Muslim family, I go to church, that's fine. We all worship the same God. It will all make sense. But no, like the passage I'm going to be reading in a minute, when Jesus says, I'm the way, the truth, and the life, the only way to the Father is through me, that really made me think and consider what is it that I believe in about who this Jesus is. What captivated me about Jesus is because he's a real person, but most importantly, the life that he lived and the death that he died and his resurrection, if it were to be all true, the beauty of it is astonishing, even until now. So, that's what captivated me, who he is. Friends, we believe that the Bible is the Word of God, which he has graciously preserved over the years for us to know him. So will you join with me as I read John chapter 14, verses 1 to 14. Do not let your hearts be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. My Father's house has many rooms. If that were not so, would I have told you that I am going there to prepare a place for you? And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come back and take you to be with me, that you also may be where I am. You know the way to the place where I am going. Thomas said to him, Lord, we don't know where you are going, so how can we know the way? Jesus answered, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. If you really know me, you will know my Father as well. From now on, you do know him and have seen him. Philip said, Lord, show us the Father, and that will be enough for us. Jesus answered, Don't you know me, Philip, even after I have been among you such a long time? Anyone who has seen me has seen the Father. How can you say, show us the Father? Don't you believe that I am in the Father and that the Father is in me? The words I say to you, I do not speak on my own authority. Rather, it is the Father living in me who is doing his work. Believe me when I say that I am in the Father and the Father is in me, or at least believe on the evidence of the works themselves. Very truly, I tell you, whoever believes in me will do the works I have been doing, and they will do even greater things than these, because I am going to the Father. And do whatever you ask in my name, so that the Father may be glorified in the Son. You may ask me for anything in my name, and I will do it. This is the word of our God. Now I invite Rick as he speaks.
Let's see if that's working. And I still forgot. So good morning. My name's Rick. It's great to see you. I'm one of the pastors here at Landway Church. As Sarah has said, we're wrestling with the second of our 4 big questions this week. Now, if you were here last week with us, you might know that we don't want to just answer these questions, but we're sure that from this, a lot of other questions can come up. So if you see on the screen, there's a phone number. It will go to a phone. I don't know if the person wants me to say who it is, but yep, it's Sarah's. There we go. I was about to, Sarah's phone. After we go through and answer the question for a little while, Sarah will jump up and it'll be an opportunity for any questions that you have. You can text them to Sarah and I'll do my best at answering them. As I said last week, sometimes my best at answering them is, I'm sure there's an answer, I don't know it. Let me spend some time in the Bible. I'll give you a call through the week, or let's chat next week. But we're convinced that God does have answers. And so I want you to be able to ask those. So if any questions come up, if you're joining us on the Zoom or if you're hearing us in person, this is your way to do it. Text your question through to that number and we'll look at that afterwards. Now, in my second year of uni, I was sitting in a class and one of the lecturers told me a really fascinating and there's something beautiful about this story. It's an ancient Hindu proverb of 6 blind men walking through the forest. And as the 6 blind men were walking, each of them stumbled across something they didn't know what it was. What they'd stumbled across was an elephant. But each of them had found themselves at a different part of the elephant. And so for one of the blind men, he went up to a part and he touched the trunk and he tried to feel it and understand it, but he'd never seen an elephant, so he didn't know what it was. And he said, "Oh, everyone, I think I found a snake." The second man, he arrived at the ear and he felt it and he said, no, it's a large fan. We found a large fan. It's not a snake, it's a large fan. The third man, he placed his hands on the elephant's legs, or just one of the legs, and he felt around it, felt that it was thick, it went down to the ground. He said, no, everyone, it's not a fan, it's not a snake, it's a tree. We found a tree. The fourth feels on the elephant's side and realized that it doesn't move, it's a long wall. We found a wall. The fifth goes to the tail and he said, no, we found a rope. Everyone, it's a rope that we've got. What? I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know how you think we've got a snake. And the last man, he feels the tusk and he says, no, we've found a spear. 6 men who couldn't see found an elephant, and each of them came with their own thoughts, with the information that they had about what they'd found. Now, the reason that my lecturer at uni was telling me this is because he said that is exactly what religion is. That's exactly what religion is like. Judaism, Christianity, Buddhism, Hinduism, Zoroastrianism, all of the religions have just found a part of the elephant, but they can't see the whole thing. And so as each comes to understand something of what they've found, they say, oh, this is what it is. They all think the others are wrong, but in fact, they've all found the same thing. Now, I don't know about you, there is something that is capturing about that. There's something that's beautiful about that they've found this thing. And if you just take a step back, there's actually so much more than any of them realize. And it touches on the question that we're asking today. Don't all religions worship the same God? Now, that was one of the most common questions that we got asked. Don't all religions worship the same God? Or versions of it. Aren't all religions the same? Aren't all religions heading to the same place? Different questions, the same idea. Now, for some, as Sarah said, the question might be looking at Christians, at Muslims, at people across the world who are devout in their religion and say, you're arrogant. How could you say that that is a tree, that is a spear? You're all looking at the same thing. Or it could be because you're just confused about what the religion is saying, you're not sure. Aren't they all the same? That's what we want to look at. Because not only is it a very understandable question, and a very understandable question here in Australia, because there's not been many times in the world's history where people have come from all over the world with so many different religions. And we haven't had too many times in world's history where we've got enough information to see the ways that people of different religions have hurt each other. And so now, in all times in history, it makes sense that this is a question that we have now. But it's also a good question. It's not just an understandable question, it's also a good question. Because if we actually come to religion and we work out all religions are actually the same, or they're going to the same thing, and it doesn't matter which one you go to, then it means we can go to Christianity, we can go to Islam, we can go to Hinduism, to Buddhism, and we can treat it something like a buffet. You can say, well, I like that God. I don't like what he says about hell. I don't like what he says about this thing, a part of morality, but I like what this one over here says. And so I'm going to have a buffet. If all religions are going to the same point, then it basically means that that is what we can do with religions, that we can treat it like a buffet. We'll choose the bits we like, ignore the bits we don't. It also means that when your Christian friend, who may have invited you either to Zoom or to here, says, hey, come along to church with me, if all religions are the same, then you can say to them next time, actually, no thanks. That's not how I'm finding meaning. But if religions aren't all the same, if they're not all worshiping the same God, and if there is a meaning that is different between the different religions, if they can't go together, then that makes this a really important question too, because it means that we can't just treat it like a buffet. It means we can't pick and choose the bits that we like and the bits that we don't like. And it means that we actually need to wrestle and try and find answers to the questions that the religions raise. We can't ignore them. So that's what we're going to do this morning. We're going to ask a few questions. And the first reason that I want to suggest that people think of religions all leading to the same place, they're basically the same, basically worship the same God, is because they're dealing with very similar things. They're dealing in the same categories. They're dealing with the thoughts of a higher power, mostly. Most religions deal with the thought there is a higher power, a God, gods, some group of gods, or a group of gods, or a God who present themselves in different forms, or whatever it might be. There's a higher power or powers in all but basically one religion from what I can find out. All of the world's religions see a huge problem in the world. And not just in the world, but with us, with humanity. All of the world's religions see that. And so all of them are seeking to find a solution. All the world's religions have a solution to that problem. Because all of them see a different problem, the solutions are slightly different. They all say how you can find meaning in life. They all talk about morality. For some, that's the solution to the problem, is live this certain lifestyle. For others, it just goes alongside it. This is how you should live, do this, don't do this. And they all say something about what happens after death. I was listening to an audiobook the other day. I had to go to a COVID testing place, as you know, we're all very familiar with, and I'm negative, it's fine. And I decided, I've got a free credit on Audible, I'll listen to a book, and started to listening to a book about a man whose view of the world. He was a scientist who thought that religions were all wrong. I want to clarify that because not all scientists do. They're not mutually exclusive. They don't completely butt heads. But this was a scientist who thought all religions were wrong. And one of the things that he was saying was that he avoids thinking about death. His goal in life, actually, ironically, is he's a professor at Harvard of aging. He's a professor who is trying to stem the tide of aging. He wants to extend the life of humanity. But death, he wants to think very little about it. I don't know if that was me. He wants to not think about death. And when his 4-year-old child came to him and asked about death, his answer to his child was, don't think about it. Don't think about it. And when pressed, he said, we will all die. It's just better to ignore it. Now, I'm not saying that is the best answer out there if you don't have religion, but I reckon that is a good case of what a lot of people do when they don't want religion, because that is one of the things that religion is trying to answer. This thing which is going to face all of us, and we want to know what happens after it. And so it makes sense that as we see religions, we can say, oh, they're all pretty much saying the same thing. They're all talking about a god or gods. They all see a problem with the world solution. They all talk a lot about what happens after death. They're basically all talking the same language. Yeah, they might, if you want to have the analogy, they might live in different parts of the country, but they're speaking the same language. It's a little bit like the other night, my wife and I, Ellen, we recently moved into a new home, and after unpacking boxes, we were exhausted, and so we decided to watch a movie. Now, the movie that we watched, I can't quite remember the name of it, but it had Reese Witherspoon, so that should tell you the genre of the movie that we were watching. And it took me a while to work out, had we seen this movie before? And one of the reasons is because I'm going to maybe offend some people here, but I feel like once you've seen one rom-com, you've basically seen the plot to every rom-com that's out there. Now, my wife, Ellen, would disagree and say, no, once you've seen one superhero movie, you've seen all of them, whereas I would say, no. Spider-Man, Aquaman are very different things. One was good, one was not. But that's when if you're not part of a religion, if religion isn't part of your life, then you could easily look at religion and say, oh, it's like a superhero movie. They're all the same. It's like a rom-com. They're all the same. Or it could be politicians. They're all the same. There's all these categories that we say, oh, it's all the same as each other. It's complex. There's fighting. All the same. But the problem is, once you start digging into some of the categories, what the higher power is, what the problem is with the world, what the solution is, those answers are completely different. And not only are the answers completely different, the answers actually can't work together. So for a higher power, some religions will say that there is one God. So Christianity will say there's one God, Judaism, Islam. And then you've got other religions who will say there's many gods. Buddhism, as an example, has a version which has no gods, and another version which, two different types of Buddhism. I do know things about religions. Buddhism has many gods. And so if you are trying to say, well, all religions are the same, then you're already up against a massive problem. Is there no gods, one God, or many gods? Hinduism is a really complex one because people will say, oh, they've got millions of gods. And then you'll chat to a Hindu and they say, no, we have one God. And another Hindu will say, no, we do have lots of gods. And another will say, no, we have one God who presents themselves in different forms. Now, I don't have time to go in and do a full table of all of these different things, but you hear already, they can't all be right. They can't actually even all be wrong because you've just put all the options on the table. There's no God, there's lots of gods. Someone's right there. You've got to work out who. The problem with the world, well, in Islam, the problem with this in the world is anything that humanity has done which is against Allah, the name of God in Islam, anything that is against his explicit commands. In Christianity, you might hear that and think, oh, that's basically the same as sin. Almost. It's somewhat like that. In Hinduism, they do have a concept that's similar to what we think of as sin, but that's not the biggest problem with the world. The biggest problem with the world in Hinduism is actually the cycle of death and rebirth. The problem is that that cycle keeps going. In Western versions of Hinduism, of reincarnation, often reincarnation is seen as this beautiful thing. In Hinduism, it's seen as the biggest problem. That is the problem that they're trying to fix. Buddhism, the problem is suffering. In Christianity, it goes much deeper. It's an issue of our hearts. And I'll come back to that in a little while. And so because the problems are all different in the religions, so are the solutions. The solution in one cannot fix the solution in the other because they're looking at different issues. Makes sense, right? Can't fix two different problems necessarily with the same solution, particularly if those problems are as different as going against Allah's commands and the very fact that we die and are born again. the solutions have to be different. We'll get into that a little bit more as well about the solutions. But that's enough so far to say that elephant, although there is something beautiful and appealing about that idea that everyone has come to the elephant and they've got a part of the truth, none of them are wrong. Well, in fact, all of them are wrong. All of them are wrong. It takes someone outside of those people to look and say, actually, no, you haven't found any of those things. You found an elephant. You found an elephant. And that's what we can't do that with religions. We can't say they're all the same, because the things that they are talking about are not compatible with one another. Jesus says something very strongly in the passage that we saw earlier about that. Again, we'll come to that later, but I want you to see first that we can't say all religions are the same, even for how nice that might feel. But isn't that arrogant? The question that Sarah raised earlier, isn't that arrogant? Potentially. Really potentially. It is a real possibility that you can say everyone else is wrong in a really arrogant way. You said, you're all idiots. This is the only truth. You're all idiots. That is arrogant. But if you class arrogance as just saying someone else is wrong, then we all need to be arrogant at some points in our lives. We can't live in a world where we pretend like we're all right constantly. And I wonder whether that's actually going to be as much of an issue as it was, of everyone wanting to say everybody else is right. I feel like over the last few years, what we've seen through COVID is actually the opposite. I don't feel like people are as much in the position of wanting to say everybody else is right anymore as wanting to say everybody is wrong. We're actually getting much more comfortable with that. But I think a lot of the way that those statements are being made is in itself arrogant. People aren't saying those, trying to correct each other with love and kindness, but with yelling, with insults, with those people are idiots, or some other name that we can call them. If we can put a label on them that people agree is a bad thing, then we can just ignore them. That is far more arrogant. But to say there is truth in and of itself isn't arrogant. It's like saying that if you were to go to the doctor and you say, I'm feeling really unwell, and they say, I'm really sorry, you have a brain tumor. Is that arrogant of them to tell you that you have a serious issue? You say, well, I don't feel like it's a brain tumor, so I'm going to seek a second opinion. And you go to someone else and they say, oh no, you've actually just got a pane of glass sticking out of your side. Again, both of those people can't be right. Now, sometimes our problems are more obvious, that there is a physical piece of glass sticking out of our sides. But both of those can't be right. Both of those can't be right. And it's not arrogant to try and say what is true. But to Christians here, I want to encourage you, if you do trust in Jesus, be kind and loving in how you tell people that Jesus is the truth. If you're convinced of that, I want to encourage you, be kind about the way that you say that. Be loving. For some of us, that means actually saying it. The kindest thing to say is to actually tell people, I'm convinced that Jesus is real and we all need to know him. But be kind as you talk about it. Which brings us again then to the big problem. If they can't all be right, if all the big problems can't be right, then what do we do? What do we do with the big problems that all the different religions say? Well, as I said, we don't have time to go into all the different religions, but what I do want to do is to say, you can... Am I doing something? I'll stand still for a while. you can basically break down the big problem in all the religions to one of two, the big solution to all of them is in all of the religions is basically do better. In most religions, the answer to the big problem, whatever it is do better. Do better at listening to Allah. So for a while, in answer to Sarah's question that she asked earlier, what's your experience with other religions? I have been a Christian since I was quite young, but there was quite a long time where I investigated Islam. Because I wanted to find out, similarly to what Sarah said at the start, have I just grown up in a family that has said this? And so I investigated a number and I looked at Islam for quite some time. I'll come back to at the end about why I didn't end up doing anything with that, and it increased my confidence in Jesus. But for most religions, they'll say, do better. With Hinduism, it's do better to increase your karma so that you can move further and further out of this cycle of reincarnation. Do better. There's certain forms of what sounds like Christianity which says exactly that as well. Just do better. Just be better. That's the solution. But that doesn't actually hit the problem that Jesus says we have. I'm going to read to you, we'll come back to John 14, but I'm going to read to you from Mark chapter 7. If you have a Bible, feel free to flick over there. If you don't have a Bible, there's a bunch on the table on the way out. Don't even have to tell anyone. If you don't have a Bible, just take one that's out there. I'd love to know if you do want to read it, but have a Bible. But open up to Mark 7. It should be 2 books in the Bible before John, if you have one there. Mark chapter 7, starting at verse 14. This is another time that Jesus was teaching the crowds around him. He said, again, Jesus called the crowd to him and said, listen to me, everyone, and understand this. Nothing outside a person can defile them by going into them. Rather, it is what comes out of a person that defiles them. After he'd left the crowd and entered the house, his disciples asked him about this parable. Are you so dull? He asked them. Don't you see that nothing enters a person from the outside, can defile them? It doesn't go into their heart, but into their stomach and then out of their body. Verse 20, he went on, what comes out of a person is what defiles them. Verse 21, for it is from within, out of a person's heart, that evil thoughts come. Sexual immorality, theft, murder, adultery, greed, malice, deceit, lewdness. A long list of things there. Now, if you've spent time around Christianity or you know things about the Bible, then that list might have been the list you're expecting the whole time. That's what Christians see as the big problem with the world. It could have been easy to miss what Jesus was saying is the actual problem. The problem is our hearts. Have a look at verse 21 again. For it is from within, out of a person's heart, that evil thoughts come. Evil thoughts. Now, for a lot of us, that doesn't take much to be convinced that there is a problem with our own thoughts. We all know ourselves. We all know there's things that I just wish I didn't think like that. Or there's things that we do that come from our hearts. We say, I just wish I didn't do that. But the problem can't just be do better. This isn't a New Year's resolution type of thing of, I just want to do better. If our hearts, the hearts where the evil thoughts came from is the same, if nothing has changed. The problem is deep within us. It's like if you went to the doctor and you had chickenpox all over you. One solution is to scratch off all the chickenpox. Get rid of the problem on the outside. But as anyone who's had chickenpox knows, which I've only just recently realized there's now a vaccine for that, and so lots of people aren't getting chickenpox anymore. That didn't click with me for a long time. I got chickenpox, and if you did, you know what happens if you scratch off the scabs on the outside. They scar. I still have a number of scars from scratching off chickenpox, thinking if I just got rid of it, the problem would be gone. But the problem was within me. The problem was much more core. I couldn't just scratch it away. And the same with the things that we do, we can't just do better. That's basically like scratching off chickenpox. Jesus is saying the problem is within you. You need a better solution. Which is where we come to what Jesus says in John 14. So if you've got John 14 still there, I'm actually going to read from the start again because Jesus is offering them a few things here. He's telling them about what is going to happen for them after their death. That's what he starts off by talking about. Have a listen, starting verse 1. Do not let your hearts be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. My Father's house has many rooms. If that were not so, would I have told you that I'm going there to prepare a place for you? Jesus is talking about what is to become after that. He will go to what we often call heaven, and he'll prepare a place for his followers. Verse 3, and if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come back and take you to be with me, that you may also be where I am. You know the way to the place where I'm going. Thomas, which is the name of one of his followers from that time, said to him, Lord, we don't know where you're going, so how can we know the way? Which comes to that verse that both Kwan and Sarah have quoted for us today. When these people didn't know the way to heaven, to have a solution to the problem after death, what was Jesus' answer? He said, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father, no one can come to God, and no one can have a hope after death except through me, except through Jesus. The solution to our biggest problem of having a heart problem, not a physical heart problem, but a spiritual problem, the only solution to that is Jesus. Jesus, and trusting in him is the way that we can go from death to life, from uncertainty to certainty. Now, when you compare all the religions of the world, this stands out. All of the religions are unique in different ways. I remember people used to say to me, but yes, Christianity is unique. Yeah, they're all unique. Otherwise, we wouldn't have given them different names and different people wouldn't follow them. They're all unique. What matters is how they're unique. And this is unique because it is the only religion where the answer to our biggest problem, our hearts, doesn't come from us. The solution comes from the outside, which means there's nothing that we do to know God. Jesus is the way. Jesus is the solution. Now, there's just two more things that I want to touch on, because one thing that we see here is that this makes Jesus a God like no other God. Again, there are differences between what all the religions will say about their gods. None of them have a God who came into the world like Jesus has to die so that people can have a solution to our biggest problem. No other God would die for people that were rejecting him. That is beautiful. That Jesus, that God is beautiful. But the last thing that we can know is that we can have a confidence in this. This is the last place that I want to touch on before I finish up, is we can have a confidence in Jesus. We can have a confidence in him, unlike any other religion. And this is another thing which sets the religions apart. Now, when I was investigating Islam, I found the Quran really interesting, confusing. I found it very confusing, as I'm sure if you're new to the Bible, you could find the Bible, or if you go to it takes a while to understand what's going on. But as I was coming to it, I kept asking, so how do we know this is true? And I had a friend that I was asking, how would you know that this was true? And his answer was just, well, Muhammad saw it, and we trust that it's right. Muhammad saw it, we trust that it's right. And as I've chatted to other friends from other religions, to Sikh friends, to people from a whole lot of different religions, that's always the answer is, well, they received a vision. Buddha received a vision. Or they had some teachings that they taught. But we don't know that they actually solve anything because it's just come from them. There's no other way to verify it. But for Jesus, we can know, not just like Muhammad, that he was a person that walked the earth, but we have historical records about his death, not just the Bible, but other things outside of it. And we have historical records about that his followers who had abandoned him all of a sudden started claiming that he was alive and being willing to face their own deaths because of it. They were so convinced that Jesus was raised from the dead that they were willing to be killed for it. Jesus has a place in history that no other religion can look at. Are all the religions the same? Well, no. Because even those blind men didn't know what they'd found. They didn't know that they'd found an elephant. But Jesus has come and he has spoken to us and he tells us not only our problem, but he has given us our solution. That makes Jesus completely different from every other religion in the world. Now, for you, if that raises more questions, please ask them now. But can I encourage you, don't ignore that. Because as I said at the start, if all the religions are the same, they're a buffet, we can choose. But if they're not, it means that you need to look at this. And to have a solution to what happens after death, you need to find out what the answer really is. Jesus has shown us. I would love for you to see that as well. I'm going to pray for us that God would help us as we do that. And then Sarah's going to come up and answer any questions that have been put through. Father God, thank you for Jesus. Thank you that he has come in as a person in history. Thank you that he has shown us the problem with our world, that he has shown us the problem with us. We pray that you would help us to see him for who he is, to see his answer as beautiful. Give us that clarity and help us to trust in Jesus because of that. Father, for those of us who still have questions, help us to find words to those questions and to ask them now or to someone else later that we trust. Pray that you would help us all in this because you are a kind, good God. Amen.
Got my mask on.
Well done.
Do you want to put my number up again, just in case anyone wants to? Woohoo! Here we go. Wants to send through a few questions. So here's a chance to at least advance your thinking and questions a bit. I've got two to get us started. So the first one's a really good one. It's how would you respond to the skepticism or the objection that Christians only want to believe because it's good news and it's comforting for us, and that we might actually be less willing to accept Christianity as true if it didn't feel so good?
That's a really
maybe it's sort of
question.
How do we be objective
Yeah.
in going, yeah, Christianity is real when it's actually just feels good?
Yeah. I think there's two parts to that question that I want to tackle. One of them is we like it because it's just good news. And I think part of that is I don't think there's anyone who has either become a Christian or who has investigated Christianity for any length of time who hasn't come up against things which grate against them. Everyone who comes to the Bible will have things that as they come will eventually, but usually soon, have things that, oh, I don't like that. That is not how I would have said that. I think that's part of the answer. It's not the whole answer, but I think if one of the things that you're here and you're thinking, oh, well, Christians just like because it's good news, I get that because it is. And it's the type of good news that if we understand it right, seems too good to be true. And so any news like that, we're always told to be suspicious. It's usually someone trying to steal our money or something. So have a healthy skepticism. But not everyone who has come to the Bible and has come to Jesus has just gone, oh, it's all actually really easy. There are still challenges and questions to ask. And so don't think that people have come blindly to it, pretending like there's none of those things. There will always be challenges. Because if there is a true God and we have a problem with our hearts, then there's going to be some challenges. Second part to the question is, how do we be objective? Which is a really valuable question because the thing that I always got told when I was in school was Christianity is a crutch. I don't know who said that first, but it became like a truism. Like it just became a thing that was said and it was just of itself. But everyone said, oh yeah, Christianity is just a crutch. And I can understand that. But for me, the thing that helped me the most was, so I sprained my ankle at I'm very uncoordinated. And so it took very little. I was going to say I was playing sport. It was barely even playing sport. I was running and that was enough to just completely sprain my ankle. And I was running after my dog who had escaped out of the backyard. Like I wasn't even going for exercise. And so I sprained my ankle and I needed a crutch. That crutch wasn't there just because I needed something. It served a purpose. Christianity is something that we need, like when you sprained your ankle. So when we say Christianity is just a crutch, it is actually a crutch in the sense that we all have a problem and Christianity answers it. Jesus answers it for us. But it's not just a crutch in the way that someone who is having a little niggle in their ankle might take a crutch just to make them feel better about themselves. It's a crutch it's not a crutch in that sense at all. When it comes to that point, I'm all about the evidence. So after school, so that was in year 12 that I started wrestling with Christianity or Islam. That was my big question point. And I became so convinced and I wanted to be so sure that this is a very Anglo choice. I just decided to do ancient history at uni, basically because I wanted to study ancient history, focusing on ancient Israel so that I could work out how much reliability is there to Jesus actually having been a person. I got a lot of confidence in that. I got no job the other end. I still think it was worth it. Because there is so much evidence that I would love to sit down, but from people who were believers, but also people who hated Christians and were killing Christians and actually asking each other, hey, what's the best way to kill them? Who confirm a lot of the things that we know about Christianity. So be objective. I do not want to tell you to just close your eyes and take a step and pretend like there's no questions to ask. There are. The good thing is Jesus stands up to those questions. There's more to that. I'd love to chat to you more in person afterwards. Feel free to grab me, or if you're on Zoom, I don't know, I'll find a way to tell someone.
Zoom grab.
Connect on.
The Zoom grab is connect.
Yeah.
Let me summarize that for us.
Sorry, it was long.
That in one sense, first of all, yes, Christianity is wonderfully sort of comforting and relieving, but it actually also comes with it's good news, but it is also hard news to digest for sinful souls. A relief, but also brings a pain of self-realization, the pain of remorse, and the cost of following Jesus. So that's one part of it. Also that it is actually very important to be objective, to examine the evidence, and that Jesus is not just something to come to that feels good, that we can lean on because we're lazy, but because without him we cannot stand, and therefore let's be careful to make sure we're standing on the one thing that will keep us up. Helpful summary?
Yeah, that was good.
Thanks. Okay, and I've got another one, which is that what historical evidence for Jesus, what historical evidence is there for Jesus that is different to the historical evidence for other religions? So other religions all come from sort of a historical point in time, a context, a story, a person. And yeah, is there a difference between the historicity of Jesus versus the historical claims of other religions?
Yeah, that's helpful. If there's more to this than I am about to say, again, feel free to grab me or to fill in a connect form. I think one of the biggest ways that there's a difference, and there is that for the rest of the religions, as I said before, is that all of them look to the teachings or personal insights of one person. So the rest of them will look, and there's some visions or some acquired knowledge that a person has, and that's what they're teaching. And all of that teaching is trying to connect people that they're teaching with God who can't be seen. With Jesus, we do have that. So we have a lot of that, of Jesus teaching us about ourselves. And so there's still a lot of similarities there. The difference is when it comes to Jesus' death and resurrection, and to the historical accounts of those things, and that not just did Jesus' death, but there is a lot that we can bank on his resurrection, that it historically happened. The rest of them died, and that was the end. Jesus died, came back to life and said, it was true. Here I am to prove it to you. And not only that, for his life in his teaching, he'd been saying, oh, by the way, I'm going to die. And this is how it's going to happen. Because Jesus has a knowledge that none of the other religious leaders of the world could claim to have. And so then when he died and rose again, there's a number of historical sources who will say that Jesus' followers are persistent that he has risen from the dead. Now, that is fairly unique. It's not entirely unique in the ancient world, but it's fairly unique. There's not really many others who completely abandoned their leader. Actually, in this category, I can't think of any, who completely abandoned their leader and then changed their mind and said, no, actually, he's risen from the dead, and started telling everybody about that. But not only that, as I said before, they all died for it. There's a quote, I think his name's Charles Colson, who is embroiled in the Watergate Scandal. If you don't know the Watergate Scandal, beyond it, it's a scandal that happened in the United States. Wiki it later. Basically, there was 12 men who were very important in the United States, in politics, in business, and they came up with a lie. There was a cover-up. They were found guilty of it and imprisoned, rightfully so. One of those, Chuck Colson, ended up becoming a Christian, because after that happened to him, he ended up exploring the Jesus of the Bible, and what he said at the end of it was, I became convinced that Jesus was really risen from the dead, because with Watergate, there was 12 of the most influential, powerful men in the world, and they couldn't keep a lie for weeks. That they had prepared and planned. When you look at the followers of Jesus, they were men who they weren't influential. They weren't powerful. They weren't overly educated. And yet, all of them basically were taken and killed, and they never changed their story about Jesus being risen from the dead right up until the point of their death. And not just death, like think ancient death, horrific, and stuff that I feel uncomfortable even saying out loud. People boiled in oil, that sort of thing. They went to their deaths, and if they had just recanted and said, no, didn't happen, they would have gotten out of it. And yet they decided, no, I am so convinced that this happened. Now, people often do, sorry, I'm answering this for a long time. There won't be time for more questions probably. People often do die. This might be a follow-up question that you think of. People often do die for things that are wrong. So you'll see people all across the world will gladly die for different causes. Some of those are wrong. If the Christianity of the Bible, if the Jesus of the Bible is true, then people that have died for Islam have not died for the truth. They have died. But that doesn't necessarily make it true in the way that someone who has first told the story, one of Jesus' earliest followers died for what they were saying. That is very different. It's very different to die for something you've been told is true and your family have believed for generations, for hundreds of years, to die for that. To die for something that was just, well, our friend and our teacher who we know is dead and really we stole his body or some other thing that you could make up. If you had made that up, I would never. I don't think anyone would be willing to suffer the deaths that those men did if they had fabricated the whole thing. Again, long answer.
Well, let me summarize then, because it's very helpful. And we can see that Rick has thought a lot through this. So what a great resource. Please do come and pick Rick's brains with your questions afterwards. Summary is that it's not just one witness here who had a vision and then died, and his story is carried on. The Bible is rich with many witnesses, and Jesus, being a key witness about himself, foretold what was going to happen. So that's a really big part of us knowing it. Died, came back as evidence of what he had said, which brings everything into line. And then we have the eyewitness of the apostles, who then themselves verified what they had seen. And it's not just one person, it's many people in the Bible where we can read their witness. A key event being that the resurrection, if it really happened, everything in the Bible consistently holds together. So that's a great point to kind of question and investigate. And looking at the lives of the apostles, we see that sort of verified in how, what's that word? In how confident they were to die for this truth. Thanks, Rick. Is there a particular book that might be helpful to keep reading through the historicity of the Bible?
The Bible would be a good one.
I didn't see that coming. Good one.
Genuinely, though, I think for other historical things that happen, we go straight to the source. It can be easy to skip the Bible and go to some other great resources, but these are 2,000 years old at least. There's a bunch that was predated that was pointing towards Jesus, but genuinely, and if you've not read it before or not read it as an adult, feel free to ask someone, where do I start? So read the Bible, read those accounts for yourself, and there's a beauty and a cohesion to them. If not, there's another book, a helpful one called Case for Christ, which is the story of a investigative journalist who follows all of the ends and works out, can I actually have confidence that this happened? But the reason he was doing it was because he was trying to disprove it. He wasn't just trying to say, hey, look how good my crutch is. He was trying to knock the crutch out from his wife, who had just become a Christian. So there's good reason he had to really dig at it, because he really was annoyed that his wife had become a Christian. So Case for Christ by a guy called Lee Strobel can help you find that book if you'd like to read it.
Helpful that he's coming not from a point of arrogance, but of genuine investigation, where he didn't need to prove that it was right. So that'll be a helpful tone to be reading. Have a seat. Thanks, Rick. You remember that I said that I have very little experience of other religions. And so my experience is really just sort of not thinking, shall I jump into Christianity? But what else is out there? Should I go exploring? I always come back to one verse and one song. The verse is in John. Jesus has just said some really hard words, and many people are leaving him. And he turns to his disciples and he says, "Are you going to leave me too?" And Peter says, "To whom shall we go? You alone have words of eternal life." And the one song I go to is this. Let's stand up and sing together.